Okay, so I posted about this on Twitter because it was pretty funny. People with extremist views less able to do complex mental tasks, research suggests. Cambridge University team says their findings could be used to spot people at risk from radicalization. And I found it very funny because the little jigsaw puzzle piece thing reminds me of like Autism Speaks logo, you know? Like something like being a political extremist like breaks your brain into like autism shards and you have to like piece it back together, and then once you're done doing that, you're a liberal or whatever. I don't know. It looked funny. And on an intuitive level, I kind of get where they're coming from too, because my experience with political extremists has been informative to me. Now, but it depends on what you mean by extremist too. Now, some people would consider me a political extremist. In fact, I think I would probably on most sides of the aisle, but I'm considered to be like a moderate, liberal, conservative, Nazi, tanky, fascist dude by other leftists. So I don't even know. What is or is not extremism is incredibly subjective and incredibly contextual, and I honestly don't even know what that means these days. I used to believe what extremism meant. I used to think I had like that on lock in my brain, but nowadays about 3/4 of the Republican Party think that Biden stole the election. So I don't even know what extremism is anymore. I genuinely don't. It feels like conservative extremism has been normalized. But people like Bernie Sanders get called an extremist. I don't even know. Anyway. So the term extremist is politically neutral in the sense that it could refer either to conservatives or to left-leaning people. The study, built on previous research, included more than 330 US-based participants aged 22 to 63 who were exposed to a battery of tests, 37 neuropsychological tasks, and 22 personality surveys over the course of 2 weeks. So the goal here, I imagine, is to use the personality surveys to determine political affiliation, and then the neuropsychological tasks are what they're actually testing for, and they're trying to see if there are any associations. The tasks were engineered to be neutral, not emotional or political. They involved, for instance, memorizing visual shapes. The researchers then used computational modeling to extract information from the data about that participant's perception and learning, and their ability to engage in complex and strategic mental processing. So that makes sense. And hold on now. A key finding was that people with extremist attitudes tended to think about the world in black and white terms and struggled with complex tasks that required intricate mental steps. That's it's pretty interesting, huh? When you think about it. No nuance, huh? She said another feature of people with tendencies towards extremism featured to be that they were not good at regulating their emotions, meaning they were impulsive and tended to seek out emotionally evocative experiences. And it goes on to talk about dogmatism and so on and so forth. So I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking, okay, far left, far right, problems with some cognitive processes. Okay, I've talked to tankies on Twitter. I agree, there are some mental issues going on there. Well, hold on, because the title of the article is misleading. Shocking, right? See, that was the news article. But the actual study, if you read the study's conclusion, thank you, Obama bin Hunin, for putting this out there. Conservatism and nationalism were related to greater caution in perceptual decision-making tasks and to reduce strategic information processing, while dogmatism was associated with slower evidence accumulation and impulsive tendencies. Religiosity was implicated in heightened agreeableness with risk perception. Extreme pro-group attitudes, including violence endorsement against outgroups, were linked to poorer working memory, slower perception strategies, and tendencies towards impulsivity and sensation-seeking, reflecting overlaps with the psychological profiles of conservatism and dogmatism. Extreme pro-group actions, a 5-point scale. Participants are asked to rate their agreement with statements such as, I would fight somebody insulting or making fun of America as a whole, and I would sacrifice my life if it saved another American's life. Firstly, the finding that political and nationalistic conservatism is associated with reduced strategic information processing, reflecting variables associated with working memory capacity, planning, cognitive flexibility, and other high-order strategies, is consistent with a large body of literature, indicating that right-wing ideologies are frequently associated with reduced analytical thinking and cognitive flexibility. Additionally, conservative political ideology was characterized by a diminished tendency to take social risks, such as disagreeing with authority, bootlickers, starting a new career midlife, and speaking publicly about a controversial topic. Maybe this is why they complain about cancel culture. It's because they're pussies and they don't like explaining their controversial views publicly, and they put that out onto everyone else. This corroborates research showing that political conservatives tend to emphasize values of conformity, in-group loyalty, and traditionalism. These empirical consistencies between the current data-driven findings and past theory-motivated research endow the present line of work with further credibility. So to be clear, to be really clear, this article should not have been entitled People with Extremist Views Less Able to Do Complex Mental Tasks. It should have been People with Conservative Views Less Able to Do Complex Mental Tasks. This title from The Guardian is misleading. The research from the article does not find the conclusion that extremism is what correlates to these diminished cognitive abilities, but rather conservatism. Simply put, it makes you weak, stupid, cowardly, and a conformist. Simply put. So the real question is, does being a conservative make you mentally deficient, or do mental deficiencies, which arise from other social components, lead to a person being conservative? The answer is in all likelihood yes. Now, I want to be really clear about this. The fact that there is an association between political views and cognitive processes is not an indication that there is some inherent essentialist biological problem with conservatives. I don't believe in that. I don't. I genuinely do not. I think that when people have cognitive failings, like this cowardice, like this inability to think in abstract, and this highly dogmatic thinking, these aren't because their brain is broken. These aren't because their skull is shaped in such a way. These tendencies arise from certain types of socialization, and those types of socialization make your brain worse. Does that make sense? Yes, the smooth brain. See, the smooth brain is not just a product of biological characteristics. It's also the deliberate decision to take a steam iron and flatten your brain like so, like in Fooly Cooly. You iron the wrinkles out of your brain. So I want to make it really, really clear that even though we're talking about something that seems very essentialist, like when I say low cognitive ability, I'm not talking about lower IQ. I'm not, even though there are studies showing conservatives tend to have lower IQ. I'm not talking about inherent biological components. I am talking simply about, well, we all know that a person's ability to think in the abstract can often, in large part, be determined by the extent to which they were given a good upbringing. I mean, if you have good parents, not good parents gene-wise, but people, if you're raised well, that you end up having, a strong set of environmental factors that procure good outcomes. Whatever being a conservative is, it certainly does not come from good outcomes, I'll tell you that much. And this falls into, it says right here, this falls into a massive range of studies that pretty conclusively determine that, yeah, and this is why I say this, conservatism is the wrong answer. It's not just morally wrong, it's intellectually wrong too. Never fall into the trap of believing that conservatives are incorrect simply because their conclusions are morally reprehensible, though that's certainly not good. In many cases, their conclusions are simply those which result from a simpleton's perspective. They're just not smart ways of thinking. You can essentialize that to whatever extent you want, but have you ever heard conservatives, conservative regular people or conservative demagogues, talk about how they arrive at their positions? Have you ever, listened to them? Oh my God. Ooh, yeah, you can get a headache from that. Not just because it's morally wrong, just, yeah. Conservative ideology is a set of knee-jerk reactions. Yeah, 100%. It's all intuition. It's intuition. It's cognitive dissonance. It's in-group, out-group thinking. It's submission to authority. It's conspiracism. Yeah, though plenty of lefties engage in that too. It's feelings over fact. It's feelings over fact. One of the reasons why I do my channel the way I do, some of you may find it annoying that I don't do any prior research before going over a conservative video. But the reason why I do that, I've been saying this for years now, is very simply because I'm under the impression that conservative logic is so bad that you don't need any preparation whatsoever to be able to debunk it. That you should be able to just go in there because they don't have good arguments. And for the most part, this has served me very, very well. With the only topics that I don't hold this standard to are ones of conspiracy, because in that case, it's not so much about challenging the logic, it's being familiar with counter examples to that conspiracism. Oh yeah, J.F. Gariepi, for example. J.F. Gariepi, eats love, you idiot, that person, the French-Canadian Nazi, that person was considered one of the, foremost advocates of race realist ideology, black people, skull shape, IQ, etc., etc. And I went to debate him. I did no research prior, and in the segment where we talked about race realism, I kind of unironically fucking trashed him. He came off like a buffoon. Because if you have even a basic understanding, just a simple understanding of these subjects, I didn't bring any statistics, data, survey, studies, whatever. No meta-analyses, just a basic understanding of the issue. You remember, some of you saw that video, I'm sure. You remember, I imagine, what that was like. I was worried going into it. I was thinking, am I being arrogant here? If I come into this discussion on that subject, will I make myself look like a fool? Will my audience be moved over to his position? Does he have facts I don't have access to? And the answer to that last question, the very last one, is yes. He did have access to facts I didn't have access to. Dude probably has hundreds of pages of documentation that supports his arguments. But it didn't help him, because his logic was flawed. That's the point that I'm always trying to get at. And that's why I'm so dogmatically opposed to conservatism, man. That's why there is no such thing as a good conservative. People who are conservatives can be good, but there's no such thing as a good conservative. The conservatism can never be justified. That's why I don't want a strong Republican Party in this country, like Biden so obstinately seems to think is necessary. I do not think that is the case. I think, put simply, that conservatism, as we understand it, honestly, is really just a political ideology which is the summation of all of our worst intellectual biases. Everything stupid, everything weak, everything wrong, everything fearful, everything dissonant in our thought process, everything in our head, all the components of our thinking that we've been trying to excise through education and through introspection. Conservatism is just all of that mixed up together. It's just feeling and fear. And it's not fun to be a conservative either, because I know right now that there are probably millions of white people in American suburbs who are massaging their firearm, waiting for a MS-13 cartel member to break down their door and murder them in Missouri. They're constantly angry. They're constantly fearful. The red pill is just an invitation to self-justifying cognitive weakness. There are plenty of other studies on this bullshit that you can take a look at if you really, really want to. I mean, the conservative associations with intellectual deficiency. I think Biden's point is we need a strong opposition party to avoid one-party rule. Then that party should be to the left of the Democratic Party. There is absolutely no reason why we need a Republican Party. There's not. It's like if we must settle for two parties, there's absolutely no reason why one of the two must be neoliberal, occasional pretense at doing good while ultimately holding back progress in the country, and the other one being a party of lunatic fascist corporatists. There's no reason. We don't. If we're to choose the two parties, and we must get rid of one existing one, I want to be rid of the Republican Party, and then I want another social democracy or even a socialist party to be the other one. And then the Democrats can be the right-leaning ones, Bernie and AOC can swap over, and we can have our fun, okay? That would be lovely. It's not going to happen, but it would be lovely. And I don't think any social good is done by Biden and the people like Biden signal boosting the idea that there's some sort of principled conservatism in this country that should be resurrected, that Trump is actually just a deviation from the otherwise strong and righteous and fiscally minded conservatism that exists where? Where and when? Where and when and how? Principled conservatism was what, Reagan? Trickle-down economics? You mean the objectively, factually incorrect thing that doesn't happen? That's the principled conservatism we're talking about? What? When was this principled conservatism? I've never heard of it. I've never seen it. Are we talking about the people who were opposing the civil rights movement? Was that principled conservatism? Back in the 1960s, where they're throwing rocks at the Little Rock Nine, you know? Screaming at black children, was that the principled conservatism? Was it the plantation owners? Tell me, how far back do I have to go? Before I find, was it George Bush Sr.? A person who, in spite of how little coverage it gets, was responsible for an unfathomable amount of terrible domestic and foreign policy? Where was it? Where was it? It's easier to justify the Dems with a Republican's existence. That's true. The shittier your opposition is, the easier it is to justify your own existence. And in fact, a lot of the reason why, a big part of the reason why we are so hesitant in our criticisms of the Dems is because necessarily the alternative to the Dem solution at the moment, at least through electoral politics, is the Republican solution. It would be much easier to criticize the Democrats if there was if there was a party to the left to actually like push towards. Oh God, I can imagine if there was a prominent party to the left of the Democrats, a functional party, first past the post gotten rid of, we all have ranked choice voting, and they were really properly to the left. Oh God, we could annihilate the Democratic Party. We could trash them every moment of every day. So how do we change the shit show at all? Well, that's complicated, but anyway. What do you get done by calling the common person conservative wrong and an idiot? Oh, let me be clear. When you're arguing with a conservative, don't call them an idiot, but do say, hey, your political ideology sure is heavily associated with a bunch of cognitive deficiencies. You don't want to call them an idiot, okay? But I don't argue one-on-one to change the minds of the single individual that I'm talking to. What I do is I talk about this, and what I hope is that the conservatives listening to me say, oh, well, obviously I'm not like that. Of course I'm not like that. But it is weird how my political ideology is associated with so many key intellectual hangups. And then they think, oh, well, maybe this, that, and eventually they move over, you know? But you don't want to directly call people that, obviously.